our client is going to experience sticker shock and just keel over and die. Oh, we paid our photographer $2,000. And I'm over here like thinking like, okay, I'm gonna write them an estimate for roughly $10,000. And on larger jobs like this, I charge as if I buy one of these for every single client. Now, do I have several jobs on one hard drive? Obviously. You'll be the first artist that has ever done this for them, that has ever sat down and been like, here's the deal, you know? And it's not hard to understand if somebody takes the time to explain it to you. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Rich Artist Fridays. I'm so happy you guys are here. It's so good to see you guys. It's so fun to get to chat with you guys before we hit record and before we go live. Hi to everybody in the Instagram live. Oh, let me turn off. Sorry, 1 second, you guys. Let me turn off my Wi-Fi. So many different steps at this point. I'm like, okay, audio, video, live stream, turn off the Wi-Fi so we have good reception. Hi, everybody. If it's your first time here, my name is Sophie. Thank you for tuning in. I'm the founder of the Rich Artist Program. We do workshops. We do Rich Artist Fridays every single Friday that are always 30 minutes for free, where we talk about any sort of subjects that are relevant for entrepreneurs, freelance artists, photographers that want to run their own business. That's sort of why I founded the program, is to get input, get a community about how to run your business, how to set your prices, how to negotiate with clients, but also, you know, how to strike a good balance between being creative and running a successful business. I myself have a degree in photography and I never got taught how to run a business. And I think a lot of artists don't really identify themselves with the identity of business owners or of being entrepreneurs, because we're so fixated on being artists, which is a good thing. That's what makes us good at our art. But in the course of my career, I found that if I don't have a strong backbone through my business, then my art severely suffers. I suffer, my mental health suffers, you know, my creativity significantly suffers. And I really don't think that's necessary. And it's called Rich Artists to sort of break that stigma of a starving artist lifestyle, because I don't think it's necessary. And I think you guys are so talented and your art is so important. The messaging included in your art needs to be heard and needs to be seen and deserves a platform if that's what you know, what you wish for your art. It deserves an audience, and you deserve to thrive doing what you love. And that also includes, you know, monetary compensation. That also includes clients that, you know, value you, that you feel seen by, that you feel excited to be a part of their brand's journey, if that's what you want, or high-paying private clients that have enough production budget for you to create something really, really amazing that your client feels seen in and that they value as well. So we're here to talk about all of that. And I also experienced so much gatekeeping in this industry, which I thought was such a shame. And I think it's a very outdated sort of competitive mindset. And I wanted to, you know, do this program to sort of counteract that a little bit, because I know oftentimes we're all sort of in the same boat. And I think that's sort of a shame that we oftentimes feel so out here by our lonesome and we don't really get to connect over these things. When I do have an exchange with you guys, I find that a lot of you guys are sort of working on the same hurdles within this career, because, you know, it's not like there's a one way works for everybody. It's not like we're doctors and we're like, okay, if you do this for 8 years, then here's your job, here's your successful career, you know? So we might as well have an exchange about it. And today we're going to do the same thing. Today, we're going to talk about how to explain your rates to clients. Now, if you're in here in the Instagram Live, I'm going to give you guys a run through like an actual copy of an estimate that I have previously done for a client. And if you guys want to see that, like the actual, I'm going to share my screen here in Zoom. You can watch the recording on my YouTube, but there's a link in my bio and the recordings always go up. And if you ever want to like live partake in the Zoom sessions, then sign up via the Eventbrite, so you can actually, you know, also like pop in and say hi to me. I was just saying hi to somebody all the way from Australia, which is probably our farthest Rich Artist Friday attendee ever. So thanks for being in here, and applause to you, because apparently it's like 2 a.m. in Australia. So that's freaking awesome. And yeah, I think let's jump straight into it. I'm going to give you guys a couple of general things I like to say to clients. And then if you are sort of going through the breakdown of an estimate with a client, sort of how do you explain these line items to a client? And I think first and foremost, I want to say that if the client is dead set in their rates. And if a client is not in the right headspace space of understanding that any sort of photography production should be an upfront investment in their business, there's only so much we can do. There's only so much we can say. And we've already done Rich Artist Fighters of like what to say when you first meet a client, sort of how to get them to understand that it's in their best interest to invest in this sort of production with you. We've talked about all of those things. So today I want to talk more about like the actual numbers. I think a lot of us at some point in our career, we're scared that if we say a number, our client is going to experience sticker shock and just keel over and die because it's a number that's so outrageous to them and so like incomprehensible that they'll just like go running for the hills, and we're left over here being like, oh no, like now I messed that up for myself. That's not really a good way to approach it in the first of all. Second of all, we've talked about this, like if you're writing an estimate for a client, hopefully you've had enough time with them where you've gotten to talk to them. They've sort of given you the rundown of what sort of scale this production is going to be at. And when I'm talking to a client, I try to push them to give me sort of a working budget, or like at least ask them like, what did you pay the last time that you ran a photography production? What was your budget then? And at this point, I never really talk numbers when I'm first asking these questions to a client, but I am telling them that like I'm gathering all of this information in order to ultimately write them an estimate, and then hopefully I'll get the chance to sort of explain it to them, or at least in a couple of lines in the email, be like, here's the numbers I ran. So when I first start the whole conversation around like where my number is going to hit, even before I give them a number, if I've gotten like sort of a rough number out of them, let's say from their last production, and like I've had a conversation with these people in my head, I'm thinking, let's say like I'm thinking $10,000. And then at the end of the call, I'm like, well, like what was your production budget last time around for photography for your campaigns and stuff? And they're like, oh, we paid our photographer $2,000. And I'm over here like thinking like, okay, I'm gonna write them an estimate for roughly $10,000. And that comes a little bit with experience of like, okay, this should hit here, this should hit here, this might hit over there. At this point, I think I'm confident enough to give them a little bit of a reaction, which I think is helpful sometimes for clients to sort of know where they're at with you. And I also do that on purpose in order to prevent sending a client an estimate and them being like, where did that come from? So to give them a little bit of a warning, even though I'm not giving them an actual number yet, of whether your numbers are going to hit higher, if what they're thinking is feasible for you. So sometimes if they say like a ridiculously low number, I'll say something like, that's like quite far on the lower end of productions that I've ever been presented with for the scale of this campaign that you just described to me. Or the numbers that I've seen for what you're looking for have been quite a bit higher typically than what you're telling me right now. You don't have to be like, my God, you're so stingy, or like, that's never gonna work, like, because you don't really want to give them a decision or like an opinion right away yet, when you haven't even had the time to sit down for yourself yet and run your own numbers, and then also have time to reflect, like, is this a project I really want to do? Is this something that I'm going to regret saying yes to because I'm going to feel underpaid the whole time? Like, that takes time, and you don't want to do that in the presence of the client. You want to do that by yourself. But with a little bit of experience, that's helpful if you can sort of sit there and be like, feels a little bit on the lower end. Or, sometimes I like to say things like, I think it would be a great time for us to start working together at this point. I think we're both ready, and I think, we're very aligned I feel very aligned with this project. I'm gonna do my best. I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna crunch the numbers for you, and I'm gonna see if I'm able to hit a number that meets you far enough halfway where I think we might be able to find common ground. Like, you want to make the client feel like you're doing everything in your power to be available to them and to make your services and your talent accessible to them, because you want them to feel like you're in the same boat with them, but you don't want to be like, all right, just like scratch all my numbers that I need, and I'm just gonna like drop my prices for you. I'm gonna make myself extra cheap for you, because ultimately the client will not value you as much as if you sort of push them a little bit in their budget, if that makes sense. So those are some general things I do first. Then obviously I'll sit down, I'll write them an estimate, and we've talked about, like, how to write estimates, where your prices should be hitting, all of that. Now, when I send the estimate to a client, it's always via email. So depending on what we talked about before, I'll send them an estimate and I'll be like, this is where my numbers ended up hitting. And, oftentimes the client will want to be lower than where your estimate should hit. Like, I always believe that your estimate should be pushing the budget a little bit, but it should be something where you feel like, okay, I know this is the number I'm giving the client. This is what I'm comfortable ending up at, and that's going to be a little bit lower than where your estimate is potentially at. But then you also know where your bottom line is, because you should always have a bottom line. Because if you're willing to just like do any type of job for whatever payment, you're never going to get to the level of production budget that you're actually after, if that makes sense. And we've talked about this as well in like how to set your prices and stuff. So before you send an estimate and before you sort of are able to explain to a client, like, this is what I need, like, this is a non-negotiable for me, you should know where your bottom line is. Let's just take a look at some numbers, because I think this is going to give you a little bit more of a concrete example of if a client then comes back and they're like, well, we can't hit this number, like, what do we do? And you're like, okay, here's what we can do. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys in here in the Zoom. Let's see. So obviously I erased the actual client name from this, but these are some real numbers from a production that I once ran. And when it comes down to explaining your prices to a client, like, for example, a lot of this is a slightly larger brand. For everybody that's here in the Instagram live, this is around a $50,000 production budget that I have listed here. Now, not every job is going to look like this. Some of these are going to be like boutique brands or whatever, and your budget's going to be hitting closer to like $5,000, maybe $10,000. So these numbers will be significantly lower. One point of question I get a lot is the usage rights, especially from smaller brands. You might be talking to a brand that has never been charged usage rights by a photographer. Like, the photographers are just sort of like, okay, give me $3,000 and I'll give you all of my images. Usage rights at this point are sort of a non-negotiable for me, and obviously the numbers won't be quite as high as you see them here. Like, in this estimate, guys, I'm charging, let's see, what is it? $30,000 in usage rights, because this was a really big campaign. But even if I'm talking to a really small brand and I'm only charging them a couple $100 of usage rights, it's something where I feel like I can always give clients a little bit of wiggle room, even because if they're like, this is our first time being charged usage rights, like, where is that number coming from? And that's where you can be like, okay, well, you described to me, like, just you want to use the images for everything. I know you're a smaller brand, so maybe we can strike some of the usage right terms, because they might not even be relevant for you, and try to bring that number down a little bit. That way the client feels like you're taking a step towards them, even though you're still upholding your standards of charging the usage rights in the first place. Because ultimately we want to establish a relationship with these brands, and then when they come back next year and then the year after and the year after, and their brand is growing, you want them to be able to pay you more for these usage rights. But this is something where you could be like, okay, well, I don't think you guys are going to do consumer print advertisement, for example, which I have in here as a separate line item because some clients ask for it to be separated like that. Consumer print advertisement is like running ads in magazines or something like that. And you're like, Have you guys ever run ads? Like maybe I can strike that out. We haven't talked in depth about like the nitty-gritty details of your usage of the images. So I think this is where we can have a little bit of wiggle room. Let's just start at the top line item. Pre-production fee. It's something I always have in there, even if it's just $100 or something, because that is time that you have invested before you actually do the job. And it's something that I always charge. And depending on, where you're at with this client, this number is pretty fixed for me because I've sort of estimated the time that is going to go into a project, especially if it's a slightly smaller project. You can sort of anticipate, okay, we're going to have another 2 phone calls. I'm going to have to make a phone call to the studio. I'm going to have to put in time to put my assistants on hold, yada, yada, yada. That is the fee for your pre-production fee. With larger brands, this pre-production fee is something where I give a little bit more wiggle room because I like this estimate specifically here for this client ended up being a couple of months of pre-production. So there was a lot of phone calls and I couldn't have really anticipated how much time actually goes into this. So that's why the pre-production fee is pretty significant, but it's typically something that I just sort of try to guess how much time investment it's going to be. And I try to give them a concrete number so that by the time we hit the production, I'm not like, oh, I ended up investing twice the amount of time on calls with you than I thought I would. And so now this number has doubled, because that can sort of make you look like you don't, like that feels risky to a client to not know what that number is going to be. Then I have my daily rate here. I at this point, when this is just like for me to run my numbers, but it'll say like, based on a 6-hour shoot day or whatever it is, and then that number. My day rate is something that I like to have solid, because your time, the value of your time, that's the value of your time. I don't think that's where you should then go to a client and be like, but let's just scrap that. You don't need to pay me my full rate. Like, I'll just charge you half. Like, you can if you feel like you already have a relationship with this brand and, you've been in the works, in the talks for a long time, these people, then maybe, yeah, you can be like, just between you and I like you guys so much. I know that we have a long-standing relationship ahead of us. I believe in your brand. I feel aligned with your messages. Like, I feel aligned with you guys as people. Like, I'm going to give you guys a friendship discount on my own time value. Like, that is a big step, but that is something that I would very rarely do. But that's something where you can give your client a little bit of a feeling of like, hey, like, I want you guys to have me as this photographer. Like, I want you guys to be able to afford me. Then I have my crew rates, which are absolute non-negotiables. You have to stick up for your crew. Never be like, oh, you know what? I don't need to pay my second assistant that much. Like, let's just half the day, obviously. Then we go into EQ, digital photo EQ, deliverables. These are numbers that are estimates. And depending on like what the client has described to you, what they will want, these are the sort of numbers that you're running. And then obviously also explain to a client, like, these are local numbers, like based on the rates of where I'm based or where we're going to be shooting. This also includes your personal gear, guys. So when it comes, because like that's sometimes where clients will be like, well, do we really need all of that equipment? Now, it's unfortunate that a client might question your rates for what your gear is, because you're the expert, right? So in a dream world, we'd all have clients that trust us 100% and that are like, whatever gear you think we need, like, we'll pay for it. But gear can be really expensive. For anybody that's in here in the Instagram live, like digital and photo came out to like $7,000 here. Now, obviously these are estimates, and the day of, like, you might end up needing to switch out a little bit of your gear. So this is where I would say to a client, based on experience, this is a very standard estimate for the basics of the type of light and production that we're going to be running. These are the basics that I need to have on hand in order to be flexible enough to day of see what's in front of me and create the light that you want to have. Now, will there potentially be a couple of items that I will end up not using the day of, yes, and that's when you return them to the equipment rental and you don't get charged for them if it's like in-house in a studio. Um, when it comes to equipment, like sometimes there's a little bit of wiggle room in terms of like, well, if we can find a studio space that has equipment rental in-house, sometimes that, for example, will be able to let us strike the messenger fee. For example, I have a messenger fee in here for digital if I am renting a camera and I'm having a camera delivered that day of or something like that. Because oftentimes when you're writing this estimate, you don't know yet what studio you're going to be shooting at. So you could say like, this is an estimate for a typical studio of the size that I know we're going to need, but these numbers are flexible based on where we do end up producing. But you want your client to understand that like there's expertise in these numbers, and you don't like, we can't just have these numbers, because with this sort of quality of image and quality of light that you want for this production that you have described to me, that I know this image has to look a certain type of way in order to take your brand to the next level. Because what your images look like is the quality that is going to be like that the customer then associates with your product and with your brand. That is detailed work. That is expertise work. And to create light that does that to the best of its capability is a technical skill. That is where I am the professional that you're hiring for. And I need flexibility in what is accessible to me in order to craft that for you. So yes, I will always aim to keep these numbers as low as they can possibly go, but I am not willing to sacrifice the quality of the light that we want for these images, in order to save on production budget. Like, you don't have to say it that directly to a client, but ultimately that's what it boils down to, because it's a lose-lose situation. You need access to the best sort of gear that you can possibly have. Now, obviously, like, we can create, you can hand us $50,000 and we're like, hell yeah, your kid in a candy store, like the best camera, the best lens, all of the nice gear, blah, 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 blah. But this is where you should take a firm stance on like, these are the best numbers that I can give you as of right now, knowing the parameters of the production that we know at this point. Like, we can come back once we've picked a studio, or like, this is where you can also advise and like, here is how you could potentially save on the equipment rental or on the studio rental side of things, but here's how it will affect the outcome. Like, this is where you're going to go into a little bit more of a technical discussion with the client, where you can be like, I can recreate window light with artificial light, and it will ensure consistency throughout the entire day. Or I can rent us a studio that has sort of this natural window light, organically. But with it will come a lot of variability in the temperature of light, with the angles of the light, with the contrast in the light, because we're talking about a 10-hour production here, or we're talking about an 8-hour production. We all know daylight varies severely from 10 a.m. between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. So like this is where you can be like, if you're okay with that variability and you are willing to sort of embrace this within your campaign, which based on the creative that I've seen from you might be something interesting for you to do, or is something that I would not recommend because you're using this for e-commerce. And if your light is constantly changing throughout the day, you're going to have a really hard time in post-production to sort of match all images to one another. And it's going to look messy on your website, yada, 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 like, be an expert advise here why these numbers are what you have put down on the page. I have in here deliverables, including full library access, which is like, hard drives, uploading proof images, all of these things. Like, I have, the subscription that you might need for Dropboxes included in here behind the scenes, your subscription to WeTransfer in order to be able to send larger files. Like, those are the sort of things that are sort of hidden in these numbers. And some clients might be like, what is that? Like, I don't understand that. That's sort of what you will tell them is like, it also includes your own archival work internally. Like any job you run for a client, it is your I don't want to say duty, but it's your duty to have a backup and a backup of the backup of that job in case the client loses it, that you still have a backup. And that's expensive. We all know hard drives are expensive. So that is a cost that will always come with the job. Now, do we buy one of these every single time we do a job? Do we have one of these per job? No, but that's none of the client's business, you know, like we on larger jobs like this, I charge as if I buy one of these for every single client. Now, do I have several jobs on one hard drive? Obviously. Messenger, expendable studio production fee. Those are fees that were sort of in here because we were renting everything in-house, and that was just a non-negotiable fee that came with the studio. I have the studio fee in here, obviously, because I already knew roughly where we were going to shoot. So I wanted to give the client an estimate of what my local fees were. But that's something where, like I said, you know, sometimes you can tell your client, like, this can vary a little bit. And then we come to the usage rights. And that's, you know, that's where I will always be like, even for example, this year, I'm shooting with a brand that like last year with them an estimate, they couldn't afford me yet. They've come back around. This year, we're actually going to do the production. Their last photographer, the photographer didn't charge usage rights ever. So this is their first time ever running a campaign shoot where they are being charged usage rights. Now, did I make these numbers really, really low for them? Yes, because I didn't just want to out of the blue have to charge them like excessive amounts of usage rights because they're a slightly smaller brand. Their visibility is still on the smaller side. But I said to the client, it is a non-negotiable for me to at least have it in here in this estimate and in the deal that we're making, even though you can see that I have significantly dropped these numbers. These are as low as I have ever set these numbers before per image. But I'm doing this to start us off on the right foot, establishing our working relationship together, because my images are my only product and I am the sole copyright owner of these images. I want the first deal that we ever make together to include this type of deal that I am selling you the usage of the images, because that is the sort of working relationship that we are entering into. So I find it baffling that other photographers or that your previous photographer didn't include that clause in your guys' contract. So, you know, as you can see here, the numbers are so low that I have put it in here more as a formality, but it is sort of for us to establish the baseline under which we are entering into a working relationship together, because I know that you guys are going to grow. I know that you guys are going to sell crazy amounts of products. Like, I believe in your brand. I think your product is amazing. I think your marketing is amazing. The campaign that we're about to produce, people are going to love, and they're going to, you know, build a standing relationship with your brand. And I want you guys to grow and success. And I know that I can be an asset to you guys in doing that. I know that I am the right artist for you to work with in order to do that, in order to take the next step. And I know that you guys are also ready to invest in that sort of production because you know that that is what you need right now. So this is the only type of deal that I am willing to make. But as you can see here, you know, when it comes to numbers, these numbers, I adjusted these numbers to represent the size of your brand, to represent where you're currently at within the scale of your company. That is sort of how I would explain that to a client. And then I have in here contingency, which in this case is pretty high. It's $800. But for a small brand, I will also just sort of have that in there as a formality. Like sometimes I'll literally just say like $100, and clients will be like, what's this random $100? You know, like it's not like we're just like slap on another 100. Contingency is you are guaranteeing the outcome and the smooth running of a production for a client. And there's always unforeseen costs, whether it's you need to put your intern in an Uber to run and grab this sort of battery from CVS, or you need to buy umbrellas for everybody because it's fucking pouring and you need to unload the equipment from the truck, whatever it is, like you are ensuring that you can run a production for these people day of, and that needs certain financial insurance. And by the way, guys, like your own internal insurance is sort of included in some of these numbers here, like the pre-production fee and the contingency fee. Like you, if with this production, for example, you know, I had several crew members to insure, I had a liability insurance that I needed to do, and like the liability insurance is like $400 a year. So like every single client that you're charging, you're sort of covering the costs of like running costs that you have internally. Obviously, you're not going to be like, oh, I'm charging you contingency and telling you it's like for emergency unforeseen costs, but really it's so that I can pay my insurance. Like you're not going to say it that way, but that's what this number is also for. So you're going to say to a client, like, this is a non-negotiable number to ensure the smooth production of day of, and to cover any unforeseen costs. And sometimes in contracts, I will have it in here, contingency, and then it'll say something like estimate actual charge based is like backed up by receipts. So the client will know, okay, this is only a number that we will actually get charged if this expense actually occurred. That's another way to sort of make it look, you know, make it more comprehensible that this is an insurance number, where you're like, well, if we didn't have any expenses, then I won't charge you these $100. But for every unforeseen cost that is there, you will be getting a receipt, but that you will be charged for it, and that you have already signed off on the fact that you know and you're aware that this might happen. So that is sort of the breakdown for how I would explain my rates to a client. How do I get back to you guys? Okay. Here we are. Hi, guys. Again, if you guys want to see this breakdown, go watch the recording on YouTube. I'm sure there's a bazillion other things that I forgot and things that I would say to a client. Maybe if you guys want, and if this is like a big topic for you guys, I'll do a part 2 on this. But I hope that this installed a little bit of confidence in you to write the numbers that you know you want to write and that you need to write, and to feel confident enough to sort of defend them, or, you know, it's not even about like defending or like proving to a client that like I'm right and you should be paying me these numbers. It's more about being able to feel like I'm able to take my client by the hand and make them feel seen and understood. And like, we all know that clients have limited budgets, that they have numbers that, you know, they need to stay within. It's not like they can just make money appear out of thin air, but we all want our clients to understand that this is an upfront investment. And a lot of clients, you know, there is a little bit of wiggle room if they understand if the investment is worth it. And going through the estimates with your client or explaining certain numbers with them will make them feel like they can trust you more. Like you're not just ripping them off and you're like, the numbers are what the numbers are, figure it out for yourself. It's more like, I know that you don't do this every day, so let me help you understand it, and let me explain to you, like, these are numbers that it's not in your interest or in my interest to try and, like, you know, make them any lower than what they already are. Like, trust me, I know these numbers and I am doing my absolute best to my capabilities to keep these numbers low for you. I'm not just ripping you off, but like, these numbers are what they are out of experience, and there's a purpose behind it, and let me explain you that purpose. And then here are numbers where this is where I think you should be hitting, but I understand that you have limitations, and I am willing to work with you. Let me show you what we can do if we have to, but let me explain to you how that will affect your outcome, and how that will affect how valuable these images will be to the goals of your brand. That's what, that's, you know, that's where we go beyond just being artists. We are business owners. Like, that's how to show up empowered in your business and in a professional way. And I think it's super, super valuable, because if you can show up like that and have a conversation like that with a client, like, you know, that client's going to want to come back to you, because you're actually, for a lot of clients, you'll be the first artist that has ever done this for them, that has ever sat down and been like, here's the deal, and it's not hard to understand if somebody takes the time to explain it to you. So yeah, that's where we're at, and I want to empower you guys to be able to have these conversations. Obviously, artists have agents that do this for them. They have managers, whatever it is. There's nothing wrong with having people that will do this for you. And not everybody is going to be good at these sort of like sales pitches or conversations. But I don't think it's logical to assume that just because we're artists, we're incapable of doing this. And when I learned how to do this, I actually felt so much more empowered as an artist. And I felt so much more confident in like, yeah, I am an artist, I am a creative, and I have expertise when it comes to creative stuff. But like now I can back up what I know I'm good at with these sort of conversations, with the way that I show up as a business owner. Like that makes me feel so much more stable in being a working creative. And I want you guys to feel like that too, because I think it makes being creative and it makes being an artist fun again. It makes us flexible, it makes us creative, it gives us peace of mind, it makes us feel empowered. And I think ultimately our art absolutely benefits from it. And I want your art to benefit from this sort of stuff as well. So thank you for listening. Thank you for, teaching yourself these things. Give yourself a big round of applause. I think it's amazing that you guys are showing up to teach yourself this sort of stuff, that you're getting curious and that you're empowering yourself to know how to do these things and feel comfortable in these sort of areas of your art as well, because this is part of it. So I know you guys are smart and intelligent for seeking out this sort of knowledge. And if you have any colleagues or friends that they would benefit from learning these sort of things too, send them the link to the recording or tell them about the Rich Artist Fridays. If you want somebody to accompany you in your career one-on-one, hit me up. My consultations are for free. I have one-on-one coaches that I've accompanied for months, sometimes even years throughout their career, because with growing success comes new hurdles. And I love being there for you guys. That's the whole purpose of this program, is that we find community within one another. We realize, hey, we all struggle with figuring this out for ourselves because nobody freaking teaches us this stuff. And every once in a while, we need a little bit of guidance and somebody that can show us the next couple of steps that we can take in order to grow our career in the direction that we want to be, because we are empowered to create what we want that to look like for ourselves. We're not just, at everybody's mercy that if we're just good enough artists, then our success will come. We create our own success, and you can, because I had to do it for myself too. So thanks for showing up, guys. Check out the Eventbrite for the next upcoming Rich Artist Fridays. I'm about to sit down and figure out what we want to talk about next, and then just stay tuned on my Instagram, where I always announce what the next couple of topics are going to be. And then every once in a while I do like polls, or you can send in suggestions of if you have a topic that you'd like me to talk about. Most likely we'll be able to fit that in at some point. So I love you guys so much, and I will see you next week. Bye bye.